Good evening, everybody. Today's chapter is chapter 12, that is mineral nutrition from 11th biology NCERT. So, first of all, what are nutrients? Nutrients are the compounds of food or essential for healthy living, and they are important for the survival for the living organism. They have a very important role in growth and development as well as in regulation of many metabolic processes. The major nutrients are fats, carbohydrates, proteins, fiber, water, minerals, and vitamins. The fats, carbohydrates, and proteins are the direct sources of energy, whereas vitamins, minerals, water, and fibers are indirect source of energy. In these nutrients, water is required in the highest amount, whereas vitamins are required in a very low amount, because they are the supporter for the other nutrients. The next is mineral nutrients. So in this chapter, we will discuss about the mineral nutrients that are required for the plants. So the mineral nutrition is defined as the naturally occurring inorganic nutrients present in soil and are essential for the proper functioning of plant body. They are absorbed by the roots and in the form of salts and are dissolved in soil water. And there are methods to study the mineral requirements of plants. There is a technique called hydroponics, which is discovered by Julius von Sachs, who was a German botanist in 1860. In this technique, there is a growth of plant in which there is complete absence of soil, and the soil is replaced by nutrient solution. And the nutrient solution contains water and nutrients. This is the typical setup of the nutrient solution culture, in which the water and nutrients are kept in a funnel, and whatever nutrients are required, they are added in the funnel. This technique is used to identify the essential elements for the plants and also for the discovery of deficiency symptoms. In this setup, the requirements, the first requirement is the funnel. Then there is a nutrient solution that includes water and nutrients, and the other important part is the aerating tube. The aerating tube is responsible for the adequate aeration, in which that provides the proper oxygenation that is helpful in the respiration of the roots and the nutrient circulation, due to which there is the interaction with a continuous interaction between the nutrients and the elements, so that the elements can be properly absorbed by the roots. And this is a very good technique, and this technique is also used for the commercial production of vegetables like tomato, seedless cucumber, and lettuce. And so in this technique, how we can discover the deficiency symptoms? So if like we want to see the deficiency symptoms of nitrogen, okay, so we will add all the other nutrients except nitrogen in the funnel, and we will see the growth and development of the plant. And then we will discover that due to the deficiency of nitrogen, these deficiency symptoms will be observed. Okay, during the commercial production of the plants, the large number of plants are produced with these techniques, and it is helpful for the small plants very much. In this technique, the pipe is placed in inclined position. So here, this is the elevated part, and this is the lower part of the tube. At the lower part, there is the nutrient solution. So this solution is pumped into from the elevated part, and the solution is flow from the one end to another. And as the roots are immersed in the solution, so they get all the essential elements, and the proper growth and development of the plants takes place. And time by time, the nutrient solution is replaced, so that the plants do not face any deficiency of the particular element. The next is the essential mineral elements. So there are 118 elements discovered today, and more than 60 elements are found in different type of plants, in which 17 are the essential elements. But the plant do not have any ability to recognize that this is the essential element and this is not the essential element. So what plant do is, whatever element present in the nearby of the root, the plant absorb that root, as here they are the small plants, so transpiration pool is enough to take up the elements with the water. So if the soil is selenium rich, then plant take up the selenium and accumulate in various part of the plant. If the plant grow near the gold mines, then the plant take up the gold and accumulate it inside it different parts. And if the plant grow in near the nuclear test sites, then sometimes strontium can also be accumulated in the plant. And there are different techniques that can be used to detect a very low concentration, that is 10 raised to minus 8 milliliter of concentration can also be detected. And when these accumulated elements are extracted from different part of the plant, then this type of extraction is called as phytomining. Okay, so how we can decide that this particular element is essential or this is not? So there are 3 criteria that should be fulfilled by the property of having the essential element. So the first is the element should support the normal growth and reproduction of the plant. In the absence of that particular element, the plant cannot show normal growth and development, and it could not complete its normal life cycle. And the second is it should be specific and not replaceable. That means if there is a deficiency of that particular element, it cannot be replaced by the presence of the other element. So the deficiency should be seen clearly. And the last one is it should involve directly in the metabolic processes of the plant. These essential elements are categorized in 2 broad categories, that is micronutrients and the other one is micronutrients. As the name suggests, macro means large amount and micro means small amount. So the amount is the 10 millimolar per kg of dry matter. If the requirement is less than this amount, then it is micronutrients, and if it is more than this, then the nutrient is macronutrients. So the example of macronutrients are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And the micronutrients are iron, manganese, copper, molybdenum, zinc, boron, chlorine, and nickel. As for plants, the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen sources are carbon dioxide and water, and the other rest of the elements are absorbed from the soil as mineral nutrition. Apart from these 17 elements, there are some other elements like sodium, silicon, cobalt, and selenium. They are required by the higher plant. They cannot be the essential element, but if they are present, it will be beneficial for the growth and development of the plant. Okay, so here is the trick to learn macronutrients and micronutrients. Okay, so as carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, they are the structural component of each and every biomolecule. So it is very easy to remember that these molecules, these elements are the macronutrients, and the rest of them can be remembered as the statement. Using this statement, NPK and 3 other nutrients are called mega super. NPK for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and called calcium, mega, magnesium, and super sulfur. The next is micronutrients. So here the statement is Feb morning, common Nick join class. Iron, boron, molybdenum, copper, manganese, nickel, zinc, and chlorine. Okay, so we can make our own statements, funny statements, so we can remember these nutrients. And the next is 4 broad categories on the basis of their diverse functions. So these elements play a number of roles, and out of which first is components of biomolecules. As the carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, they are the structural elements of cells, because each and every biomolecule is made from carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So they are the components of the biomolecules. The next is they are the components of energy related chemical compounds, like magnesium in chlorophyll and phosphorus in ATP. So ATP and chlorophyll, they both are involved in the energy related, they are the energy related chemical compounds. And here the chlorophyll have a magnesium which is surrounded by the porphyrin rings, and this here the phosphorus is present in the phosphate form. The next is activate or inhibit enzymes. So the elements are also helpful in the activation and inhibition of certain enzymes in plants. The enzyme called as Rubisco, which is the highly abundant amount on the protein on the earth, and also the first enzymes of C3 cycle, and the other enzyme which is called as phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase, which is the first enzyme of C4 cycle, are activated by magnesium ion in the photosynthetic carbon fixation. And the enzyme like alcohol dehydrogenase and carboxylase enzyme are activated by zinc ion. The molybdenum is an activator for nitrogenase in the nitrogen metabolism, and iron activates catalase enzyme. And some other essential elements, they play a very important role in osmotic potential. Okay, so potassium is a very important element for the maintenance of the osmotic potential of the cell. So when the potassium ions present near the guard cells come inside the cells, and to maintain the osmotic potential, water molecules also enter into the cell. So due to which guard cells get swollen and the stoma opens. And in this case, when potassium enters into the cells, potassium moves out of the cells. Waters also move out of the cell to maintain the osmotic potential. Then the guard cells get shrunken and stoma closes, and it is helpful to regulate the transpiration process. The next is role of macronutrients. So one by one we will discuss about the role of the macronutrients. The first is nitrogen. So nitrogen is absorbed in the form of nitrate, and sometimes it is also taken up as nitrite or ammonium ion. It is required in the greatest amount, and it is particularly required for meristematic tissue and metabolically active cells, because they are continuously dividing cells and required nucleotides. They are also constituents of protein, nucleic acid, vitamins, and hormones, and that's why they are the main components of fertilizers and used in modern agriculture. The next is phosphorus. Phosphorus is absorbed as phosphate ion, as either as H2PO4 minus or HPO4 minus 2. They are the constituent of proteins, all nucleic acid and nucleotides, and they are required for phosphorylation reactions. The next is potassium. Potassium absorbed as potassium ions, and they are again required in abundant quantity in meristematic tissue, buds, leaves, and root tips. They maintain the anion and cation balance, and that's why they are important in protein synthesis, opening and closing of stomata, as we discussed, activation of enzymes, and in the maintenance of the turgidity of the cell. The next is calcium. The calcium is absorbed in the form of calcium ions. They are required by the meristematic and differentiating tissues. During the cell division, the calcium pactate is formed in the middle lamella during the synthesis of cell wall. So calcium is required by the meristematic tissue. They are also required for the mitotic spindle for the microtubule stability. They are accumulated in older leaves because the calcium is immobilized in nature, and because they are the constituent of the cell wall, so they cannot be mobilized from one part of the plant to another. The next is they involved in the normal functioning of the cell membrane, as they are activate certain enzyme and have an important role in regulating metabolic activities. Magnesium absorbed as a divalent ion. They activate the enzymes of respiration and photosynthesis. Then it involved in the synthesis of DNA and RNA, and it is also present in the ring structure of chlorophyll. They maintain the ribosome structure. So what in the maintenance of the ribosome structure, they stabilize the secondary structure of rRNA and also stabilize the binding of the ribosomal protein of the rRNA. Then sulfur. Sulfur absorbed in the form of sulfate, as the sulfur is the constituent of the amino acid like cysteine and methionine. Main constituent of several coenzymes, vitamins like thiamine, biotin, and coenzyme A, and ferredoxin. These are the macronutrients, and now we will discuss the micronutrients. The first is iron. Iron is obtained as ferric iron, and it is required in larger amount among all the micronutrients. They play an important role in ETC, that is electron transport change, in the with the ferredoxin and cytochromes, and they are reversibly oxidized to ferrous to ferric in the electron transfer. They activate the enzyme catalase, and they are essential in the formation of chlorophyll. The manganese. Manganese absorbed in the form of manganese ion. They activate many enzymes in the photosynthesis and transpiration process, and especially in nitrogen metabolism by activate nitrogenase enzyme. And the main role of manganese is splitting of water. So the initial step of photosynthesis, where the water is split into oxygen and electron, where the manganese play a very important role. Zinc is absorbed in the form of zinc ion. Zinc ion activates various enzymes, especially like carboxylase. Also, it is required for the biosynthesis of tryptophan and auxin. Tryptophan is an amino acid, and auxin is a plant hormone that is responsible for the growth of root and shoot apex. The next is copper. The copper is absorbed in the cupric ion. They are responsible for the overall metabolism in plants, and they involve in the redox reaction. Copper oxidize itself and act as reducing agent for other ions. The next is boron. Boron can be absorbed from the soil in either BO3 form or B4O7-2 form. It is required for uptake and utilization for calcium ion. It is help in membrane functioning, pollen germination, cell elongation, cell differentiation, and carbohydrate translocation. Molybdenum absorbed in the form of molybdate ion. It is a component of several enzymes like nitrogenase and nitrate reductase. They both participate in the nitrogen metabolism. The next is chlorine. So chlorine absorbed in the form of chloride ion, and along with the sodium and potassium, they maintain the anion and cationic balance in the cell. And with the manganese, chlorine is also helpful in the water splitting reaction in the photosynthesis. The next is deficiency symptoms of essential elements. So the deficiency symptoms are the morphological changes that are indication for the deficiency of the particular element. So there each element have one or more specific structural or functional role, and due to the absence of that particular element, there is some morphological change appears in the plant. There is a critical concentration required for the proper growth of the plant. That means the critical growth is that growth of the plant that this minimum amount of uh, uh, element is required for the normal growth and development of the plant. If the concentration is below the critical concentration, then the plant will show the deficiency symptoms. And if the plant will provided by the deficient mineral, then the deficiency symptoms will disappear. And if there is a continuous deprivation of that particular element, then eventually the plant may die. Okay, so it is very important to know the specific critical concentration of the particular element, and it may be different for different plant. Okay, so like there are some elements that are actively mobilized. So these elements are mobilized from one part of the plant to other plant. So if one part of the plant is deficient for some element, or it requires some element, then the element is transferred from one part of the plant to the another. Okay, so from that part of the plant from which it came, so that will show the deficiency symptoms, and it is always first appear in older tissue. And for example, the deficiency symptoms of nitrogen, potassium, and magnesium, they are visible first in the senescent leaves. Then the other type of elements are relatively immobile elements. They are the elements that cannot move from one part of the plant to the other, like the calcium. Calcium is the structural component of the cell wall. That's why it cannot move from one place to another. So the deficiency symptoms will first appear in the younger leaves and not in the older leaves. So now the deficiency symptoms shown in plants. So what type of deficiency symptoms can be seen in plants? So the deficiency symptoms can be chlorosis, that means loss of chlorophyll, and due to which there is yellowing in leaves, and which occurs due to the deficiency of nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, iron, manganese, zinc, and molybdenum. It can be necrosis, that means death of the tissue, and particularly leaf tissue, which caused due to the deficiency of calcium, magnesium, copper, and potassium. And it also caused the inhibition of cell division, like the lack and low level of nitrogen, potassium, sulfur, and molybdenum. And the deficiency symptoms may be delay flowering due to the low level of nitrogen, sulfur, and molybdenum. And the identification of this deficient element is not that easy, because sometimes what happens is, like in this case, sulfur, the deficiency of sulfur show chlorosis. It can also show inhibition of cell division, and it can also show delay flowering. So a proper study is required to identify the particular deficiency symptoms of the particular deficiency of a particular element. And it is also taken into consideration that different plants also respond differently to the deficiency of the same plant. So it is not necessary that if sulfur will always show delay flowering in each and every plant. Okay, so like here, the iron and the calcium, the deficiency of these two elements will appear first in the new leaves and then in the older leaves. and the deficiency of nitrogen, manganese, magnesium, phosphate, carbon dioxide, and potassium will be seen first in the older leaves and then in the new leaves. The next is toxicity of micronutrients. So the requirement of the micronutrients, the range which is very which is very narrow, this is known as optimum range. Okay, so if the concentration is lower than this optimum range, then the plant will show the deficiency symptoms, and if the concentration is exceeds this narrow range, then it will show the toxicity. So how we can say that this particular element is toxic? So the excess element, when this excess element reduces the dry weight of the tissue about 10%, then it is considered as toxic, and the critical concentration is very widely among different micronutrients. The toxicity symptoms are difficult to identify, and the levels of different plants. So the levels may vary in different plants. Like many times what happen is the excess of one element affects the absorption or the action of other elements. So for example, the magnesium toxicity is the appearance of brown spot surrounded by chlorotic veins. So when the magnesium is in excess amount, what it does is it competes with iron and magnesium for the uptake as well as the binding with the enzyme. And manganese also responsible for the inhibition of the calcium translocation. So there is no deficiency of iron, magnesium, and calcium for the plant, but due to the excess of manganese, the plant will show the deficiency of iron, magnesium, and calcium. The next is mechanism of absorption of elements. So the mechanism of absorption can be takes place in two phases. The first phase is include apoplast, where the second phase include the symplast. So the first phase where the transport takes place in the outer surface, that is the apoplast. It is a very fast process and sometimes the channel proteins and transmembrane proteins helps in the transport of the ions. But as the concentration of the elements is the gradient is differ, like the concentration of elements is more in roots but less in the soil. So this is an passive process, so it cannot be takes place. Or the second point is there is the minerals are present in the ionic form, so it is not easy to cross the cell membrane. So most of the elements are passes through the symplast pathway, in which the elements are passed through the inner surface. They pass from one cell to another through the space that is known as the plasmodesmata, and this is the slow process. And here are some terminologies used by the NCERT, that is the flux. Flux is the movement of ions. When the ions are moved in inward direction, then it is called as influx, and when the ions are moved outside the cell, then it is known as efflux. After the absorption of element, how the translocation of the solutes takes place. So the mineral salts are translocated through the xylem with the help of transpirational pool in the small plants, and it is analyzed with the help of the presence of radioisotopes in the xylem sap. But we cannot say that the translocation is totally xylem dependent, because sometimes what happens is the xylem, there is some exchange takes place between xylem and phloem. So some ions are transferred from xylem to phloem, and then they are transported to the other part of the plant. The transport, the mineral salts are transported can be transported in the organic form or inorganic form. In organic form, they can be transported as amino acids and related compounds, and inorganic form, they can be transported as ions. The next is soil as a reservoir of essential elements. So soil is very important for the plant, because it uh, it gives the minerals to the plants by the weathering and breakdown of rocks. That's why they are called as mineral nutrition. It provides nitrogen fixing bacteria. It provides other microbes also. It holds water. It supplies air to the roots for the respiration, and it also act as a matrix to stabilize the plants. Okay, so when the soil are deficient in some type of some minerals, then the fertilizers are added that contain both macro and micronutrient as per the need. The next is metabolism of nitrogen. So the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen cycle is the cycle, biogeochemical cycle, in which the nitrogen is converted into different forms consecutively, passing from the atmosphere to the soil to organism and back into the atmosphere. And it involves several processes like nitrogen fixation, nitrification, denitrification, etc. They are also a constituent of amino acids, proteins, hormones, chlorophylls, and many of the vitamins. And they are the plants competes with microbes for the limited nitrogen that is present in the soil, and that's why it is a limiting nutrient for both natural and agricultural ecosystem. As the environment has 70%, 78% of nitrogen cycle, but plant cannot be able to use this nitrogen, because it does not have the enzyme that can cleave the bond between the two nitrogen atom. So there is a process that is known as nitrogen fixation, in which there is a conversion of nitrogen to ammonia. The nitrogen fixation can be of two types, that is non-biological fixation and biological fixation. In non-biological fixation, this is an industrial fixation, and that another one is using of lightning. And in biological fixation, it can be non-symbiotic or symbiotic. In non-biological nitrogen fixation, in industrial fixation, the nitrogen fixation takes place by the chemical processes, in which the chemicals are used to convert the nitrogen into ammonia. In lightning, the lightning and ultraviolet radiation are used to cleave the bonds and convert it into nitrogen oxide like NO, NO2, and N2O. And other sources can be industrial combustion, forest fires, automobile exhaust, and power generating stations. The biological nitrogen fixation. Biological nitrogen fixation involves the action of enzymes for the conversion of nitrogen to ammonia. The first is non-symbiotic fixation, in which the bacteria are free-living bacteria, and they can be bacteria or fungi. They are not forming any symbiotic relationship with other organisms. And examples are aerobics are Azotobacter, Vijaynikia, and Deutzia. Anaerobes are Clostridium. Photosynthetic are Chlorobium and Rhodospirillum. Chemosynthetic are Disulfovibrio. Free-living fungi, they are yeast and Pullularia. The cyanobacteria are Nostoc, Anabina, and Oscillatoria. The next is symbiotic nitrogen fixation. In symbiotic nitrogen fixation, there is a mutualistic relationship between two organisms, in which both the organism benefits from each other. The the symbiotic nitrogen fixation is divided into legume or non-legume. The legume is the most prominent type of nitrogen fixation, in which the nitrogen fixation involves the formation of a nodulation. Nodulation, that means formation of a nodule, and the enzyme is rhizobium. The rhizobium is the uh, bacteria that establish a relationship between the leguminous plant like alfalfa, sweet clover, sweet pea, lentils, garden pea, broad bean, clover bean, etc. And they help in the formation of the nodules. And the other bacteria, that is Frankia, that will help in the nitrogen fixation. They establish a mutualistic relationship with the non-leguminous plant like Alnus. And both the Rhizobium and Frankia, they are the free-living bacteria present in the soil, but they are symbionts. The next are non-legumes. They are the nitrogen fixation fixation association, but there is no nodule formation, like lichens with Anabaena and nostoc, Anthroceras with nostoc, Azolla with Anabaena azole, Cycas with Anabaena and nostoc. So here the diagram shows the cross section of the nodule, and here is the pink color in the nodule, that is the lag hemoglobin. The enzyme which is produced by the leguminous, this rhizobium, which is called as nitrogenase, and it is very sensitive to oxygen. So lag hemoglobin protects the nitrogenase enzyme from getting destroyed by the molecular oxygen. Okay, so this is the nitrogen cycle. The atmospheric nitrogen is converted to the ammonia with the help of biological nitrogen fixation and industrial nitrogen fixation, and electrical nitrogen fixation helps in the conversion of nitrogen to the nitrogen oxides. And this nitrogen oxide can sometimes again convert to the nitrogen with the help of the denitrification process, and this process is carried out by the Pseudomonas and Thiobacillus. The nitrification is the oxidation of ammonia to nitrite, and some of this ammonia volatile, because the ammonia is volatile in nature, and the rest of the ammonia will convert into the nitrite. So this conversion is carried out by the enzyme that is called as nitromonas and nitrococcus, and then the nitrite further is converted into the nitrate with the help of nitrobacter enzyme. Okay, so here the enzyme is nitrosomonas or nitrococcus, and here the enzyme present is nitrobacter. The nitrate is then absorbed by the plant, and this plant may directly undergo decomposition, or it may be taken up by the animal, and then it gets composed. So the decomposition of plant and animal biomass will release ammonia, and this process is called as ammonification, and hence the nitrogen cycle is continuously takes place. The next is the nodule formation. So as we discuss about the symbiotic nitrogen fixation of rhizobium with the leguminous plant, here is the process that how it will takes place. So this is the root, and this is the epidermal root. This is the epidermal root hair. So bacteria grow near the susceptible root hair and infect the root hair. And the infected root hair will form a hook-like structure, and bacteria enter into it. The bacteria then form a thread-like structure, and it is called as infection thread that containing bacteria. And when it reaches up to the cortex part, the oval shape of bacteria is then converted to the bacteroids. When it is converted into bacteroids, it initiates the division of inner cortex and pericycle cells, and this continuous division of these cells will result in the formation of the mature nodule. This nodule contain nitrogenase because the bacteria are present in it. So bacteria have nitrogenase enzyme and lag hemoglobin. The nitrogenase is sensitive to the molecular oxygen and it requires anaerobic condition. So for here the rhizobium are aerobes when they are free living, but when they are in the nodule, then they convert themselves into anaerobe. So now they cannot affect the nitrogenase enzyme, and again lag hemoglobin is present, which again scavenge the molecular oxygen, and hence the nitrogenase enzyme is protected inside the mature nodule. So this is the reaction, that is the conversion of nitrogen to the ammonia with the help of the nitrogenase enzyme. So the nitrogenase enzyme, which is present in bacteria, and here we can see that the 16 ATP are required. So bacteria do not have that much amount of energy so that it can convert nitrogen into the ammonia. So this reaction takes place in the host cell that will provide 16 ATP to the enzyme, and then the nitrogen is converted into the ammonia. So both the organisms are benefited from each other. And at the enzymatic level, this is the nitrogen enzyme, and it is the active site of the nitrogenase enzyme. The nitrogen bind to this active site, and the continuous addition of the hydrogen will result in the complete reduction of the nitrogen. That means there will be no bond between the two atoms of nitrogen, and then finally the ammonia is released from the enzymes, and then the free enzymes can also be reused. The next is ammonia. So the ammonia is released here. So what is the fate of ammonia? So ammonia, at physiological pH, the ammonia is in protonated form, and it can be present as a nitrate or as well as ammonia. But ammonia is toxic for plant, and its accumulation will give rise to the toxicity to the plant. That's why the ammonia should be convert into other products. So the first method is reductive amination, in which the ammonia reacts with alpha ketogluteric acid and form glutamic acid, in which the ammonia will bind to the alpha carbon of the alpha ketogluteric acid and convert it into the glutamate in the presence of glutamate dehydrogenase with the help of NADPH. And the other process is called as transamination process, in which the transfer of amino group from one amino acid to the keto group of the keto acid, and here the enzyme is the transaminase. Here the amino donor is the amino acid, and the amino acceptor is the keto acid. So this ammonia will bind here, and the one amino acid is changed into another type of amino acid, and here this is the other amino acid, and there can be a formation of amides also. That means more in the addition of ammonia to the amino acid. Okay, the other amino group is added to the amino acid. That means if amino acid is added to aspartic acid, it will convert it into asparagine. If it will add to glutamic acid, it will convert it into glutamine. Okay, so here we can see that the OH of the aspartic acid is replaced with the amino group, and here the glutamic in glutamine, the OH is again replaced with the amino group. And we can see that the glutamine has 2 nitrogen atom, and the asparagine also have the 2 nitrogen atom. So they are rich in nitrogen. So they are directly transported to the different part of the plants with the help of the xylem vessels. And in the nodules of some plants like soybean, in the transpiration pool, the fixed nitrogen are exported as urids. Urids are the acyl derivatives of urea, and they have the high nitrogen to carbon ratio. Thank you.